Welcome to She's a Full-On Monet, a digital lifestyle magazine for women. Every week, our editor-in-chief, Kelly Castillo, along with Megan Block and special guests, participate in a deep dive discussion about recent articles and topics we have covered. We invite you to become part of our community where everyone's welcome.
Welcome to She's a Full-On Monet. This is episode 5. I'm your host, Kelly, and I'm here with Megan.
Hello, everybody.
And today we're going to be talking about a topic that I think is near and dear to both of our hearts, the sandwich generation and the struggles of that generation, how to manage some of the stress and obligations and things we can learn to do maybe a little bit differently once our children are in that age range and dealing with the same stuff. So yeah, I am a little out of sorts today. I left my laptop at airport security. I got home from Houston last night. I was there for just one night and it was a very rushed trip and I was very discombobulated. And yeah, Alex had forgotten to take off he has one of those Cartier love bracelets that you like screw on.
Yeah.
You can't just take it off.
No, you have to unscrew it.
Yeah. So he was wearing it. And then TSA was like, oh, you're setting off the metal detector. You need to go into this other area and be like completely patted down. And you know, my daughter, Gabby, she wears hers through security all the time, but she is not a Middle Eastern man in his 60s. So she's much less suspect, I guess.
Yeah, right.
So they pulled him aside and it was this whole thing. And then I was responsible for getting both of our stuff out of the bins and like not holding up the line. And he has like a million small things. He had like his watch, his belt, his wallet, his sunglasses, like, oh my gosh, he just needs a purse or something because I was like trying not to leave any of his stuff. And in the meantime, I left my laptop. So I had to run out this morning and I went to Target and got like a $200 laptop.
Are you serious?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I had no other way to to record this podcast.
I
have a desktop computer.
Did they have your like you're going to get your other one though, right? Okay.
Yeah, I'll eventually get that one back and then I'll, gift this one to one of the kids or I'll sell it or something. But I mean, my desktop computer is in a loft office that I have. So it's open to the household, which is great when I'm working. I can hear when someone calls for me, but not so great when you're trying to record something and don't want dogs barking and husband calling for you and phone ringing and doorbell ringing. Yeah. So.
Wow. Like resilient. Resilient is your word for sure. I don't know. I would certainly wouldn't have. You're a problem solver. I love that. Oh, I love it. Well, mine's not as insane. I mean, one of my kids is done with school and then the next one is done with school next week. So they're in the middle. And then my dad was in the hospital and now he just got transferred to a nursing home until his situation can get better. And it's, my little brother's taking care of him, but like I'm up here, worrying and trying to do what I can from here. So I'm worrying about him and taking care of them. And yeah, it's just,
it's like the universe tried to give you the best possible example for this episode so that you can talk about it.
Very much like resonated with, but then it's like, well, let me give you a prime example of what's going on and how to handle it. And I'm like, well, maybe I'll just tune in and also learn something too, because when I was a kid, my mom passed away before my grandparents, her parents got old enough to really need that sort of situation. So I didn't have an example growing up of what to do with this situation. So the idea of, making sure my kids or the next generation or whatever, your kids don't have, can handle it better or maybe handle it in a much more, I don't know, there's not really a better way, but it is like you're making these big decisions and handling these big emotions as they're coming up and you're dealing with these big issues as they're coming up. And it's like, is there a way to prepare for that before it comes so that you're not blindsided, but it's just tough,
It is. Yeah. Well, first of all, for anyone listening who doesn't understand the terminology,
Yes.
the sandwich generation is kind of a new term for this. And it's funny because in order to, feel prepared today, I read several of our source articles that we were using to prep for the article we're writing about this subject. And as I'm reading them, I was like, I don't need to read this. I live this.
It's my life, right? I'm like,
yes.
oh, I can just show up now.
Right. This is my life for the last 5 to 6 years. So I get it. But the sandwich generation is basically, it's primarily women, although it's not only women. It seems that women tend to take on these roles more than men. But it's anyone from the age, and generally that age range is 35 to 59, although I'm ahead of that and behind. It could be anything. You could have parents who have certain disabilities or illnesses that you need your help earlier than that. You could have children who have special needs that need more help before or after that. But that's generally what it's considered. And it's basically, it means the generation of moms who are caring for both children and adult parents who are aging, or grandparents who are aging and need care. So it's stressful enough for moms to find balance in their lives between being a mom and taking care of themselves, being a mom and having a career, being a mom and having a healthy marriage. I mean, there's a million things that are hard, but being a mom and having kids that you're still responsible for, whether that is an everyday caring responsibility or financial responsibility or just an emotional responsibility, and adding to that the need to help care for aging parents and grandparents is the most stressful time. I mean, statistics show that they have this generation, sandwich generation, has a higher level of extreme stress than any other age group in any other circumstance. So it is very, very challenging. And the advice that people will give you about, oh, do self-care, take time for yourself, and make sure that you get time away. It's not always practical. You can't always do that. So that's what we were talking about today. And I think we are both very qualified to talk about this subject.
Yes. And it's interesting because I have my own personal ones, but I also walked through a stage of life when you were taking care of your grandma, like a lot. And I just remember that was such a, like, right, understandably so, because she's your grandma, you'd love your grandma, but it was such a huge part of your day to day trying to figure that out, and then the shift of everything. Like I remember your struggle with that situation before I personally experienced my own. So
yeah, well, I'll give some background on that. My grandmother basically raised me. I considered her like my mom. That relationship was very much like a mother. And in 2015, she was diagnosed with dementia, and she was 90 at the time. So, I mean, it wasn't crazy, but we did not have a lot of warning signs. She was very sharp, very independent, lived alone for 50 years before that. And had always taken care of all her own needs and even helped us with our needs. So we were not in a caretaking mindset at that time. And she had been hiding her symptoms really, really well because she lived alone, and nobody was there to really alert us of that. So it took a house fire before we realized what was going on and got her diagnosed. But at the time in 2015, my youngest was 13. And then I had a 17-year-old, a 19-year-old, and a 20-year-old. And my oldest was struggling with his own issues that were very consuming for our family. So it was, I mean, having 4 teenagers and taking guardianship of my grandmother. I was her guardian, her conservator, her power of attorney, I mean, everything. So I do have a sister, and she helped me tremendously because she lived much closer than I did. But this was really a daily struggle. And I mean, my grandmother lived for another 2+ years, and thank goodness we had that time with her. She passed away in March of 2017. And then shortly after that, my husband had started to have some pretty serious health issues that really required me to take over a lot of stuff around the house that had been his responsibility, and just to take over, medication and doctor's appointments and care and things like that. And that's kind of ongoing. My husband's quite a bit older than me, so I'm kind of in the sandwich generation, like with that. My husband's 20 plus years older than me, so he has the normal and maybe a little extra health issues for someone in their late 60s. And so I am still, it's ongoing since then, taking care of him and taking care of the kids. And now, I mean, my kids are out of the house. My daughter is a freshman in college and is home for the summer right now, but I don't have kids in the house all the time. But that doesn't mean that I don't still have a lot of caregiving that I do, a lot of financial help that I give, emotional help that I give. So I am still momming. It's not over for me. So I'm still struggling with this. And Megan, I know you did see me go through that, but your dad has his own health issues that are, I'm sure, stressful for you, and your kids are even smaller. So I think we're both there.
It's kind of relatively new. He he fell a few times, and so he had to have shoulder surgery, and because of his shoulder surgery he wasn't moving. I have my own personal opinions about it, but I am no doctor. I feel like he should have started physical therapy maybe sooner, but the immobility after his shoulder surgery caused some like blood clots in his legs, and so he had to go to the hospital, and he's still suffering from those things. He's now in a nursing facility until he can, because he lives on 2 flights of stairs. He lives up, and they're concerned about, because he has to go up with blood thinners and the blood clot, that's just like not happening right now. He lives primarily alone. My brother, who's 4 years younger than me, he's been taking care of the majority of like everything because I live a few hours away. But that's the hard part, is because I'm a natural caregiver, and like getting these calls and hearing how he's doing and hearing how stressed my brother is, it's like I feel like it's too easy to almost just call and check in. I want to do more and I want to be there, but I have my own kids who are like, they're not older, they still very much need me every single day of so it's just kind of a frustrating situation. And I'm now realizing that, okay, my dad is not in the best of health, and this might be the start of an ongoing thing, or just trying to be there for him emotionally and physically. It's just really hard, so I'm trying to figure it all out and do it in a way where I don't know, it's hard.
I think one of the biggest stressors with the whole concept of sandwich generation is guilt for I know it was for me. I mean, I felt guilty leaving my kids at home to go drive an hour and a half and care for my grandmother. But when I wasn't there, I felt incredible guilt that my grandmother would ask for me continuously, was confused, didn't recognize her caregiver that I had hired for her, and would be combative with her. So I felt guilt. And then guilt also in my relationship, because between caregiving for my grandmother and caregiving for my kids, I felt like I was sacrificing time with my partner. And we used to take a lot of trips. We would travel. During those 2 years, I really wasn't comfortable being away for long periods of time because I was so worried that something was going to happen. And sometimes she would have, these panic attacks. And I was the only one who could calm her down. So being away for, 2 weeks in Europe or something just wasn't feasible. Yeah. And so our lifestyle changed a lot in those 2 years. And I have to give Alex incredible props for being so patient and so generous with, everything. But it's the struggle when this situation, at the time she was diagnosed, she was 90. So we knew that this wasn't going to go on for, 15 years. This was probably a short-term illness, and this is probably what she would pass from. And that's what happened. But a lot of times your adult parents start having health issues in their late 60s, 70s, and it can go on for decades. And so you really have to, even when your kids are like Kenzie's 4, right? If she's going through something that requires a lot of attention, it's short term. She's going to grow.
This could be for ever. He could just have a different complication. It's it's frustrating.
It's so frustrating.
Because there's only so much you can honestly do. My brother was talking to me and he's like, oh, we got to talk to dad about his health and this and that, because like you want to feel like you can fix certain things, so then you don't feel like you have to worry 24/7. But at the same time, life is life, and things are going to happen. There's only so much in your control that you have to honestly like set yourself free from the guilt as much as you can, because it's going to naturally happen. You're going to naturally feel guilty because you're not somewhere else doing something else. If you're being steered so many different directions,
everywhere you are, you feel like you're supposed to be at the other place. Exactly. So it's worse, in my opinion, than working mom guilt, because it's all about, caregiving for people that you love. And I can only imagine, like, you and I both have pretty flexible careers where we can be more hands-on with our kids and with our other obligations. But I know for my sister at that time, she was working full-time in a very inflexible job environment. She ended up taking a 3-month family leave to help with my grandmother for the very beginning, but she could only take so much time off. And so I can only imagine if that's your career situation and you're dealing with this.
Exactly. And my dad, he's also kind of in a weird situation where he also has a mom who's 90 plus. Before he hurt himself, he was taking care of his dad. And so he also has adult children who semi count on him as well. And so it's tough seeing him feel guilty about his situation because he wants to be there for his mom. He's been living with his mom up in Northern California primarily. So it's like seeing him also in that generation. I feel like, okay, you can put an age group on it, but you can't also at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, Alex, his mom is 87, I think, and lives close to us. So we handle things with her when we can. Thankfully, his sister is really involved with that as well. But I know he feels tremendous guilt that he, for his health reasons, that stuff is put on me, or he can't be as available to his grandchildren and to his mom. And he's in that position as well, but he has his own health issues that make it harder for him to do the things that I know he would prefer to be able to do. So a lot of that, again, falls to me.
Right.
And I don't mind doing it, but it's exhausting. This is extremely stressful, extremely exhausting. And we end up making so many sacrifices. And I mean, in my opinion, caring for my grandmother for those few years that she was ill was a sacrifice I would make 1,000 times over, because she had done so much for me in my life. And she was such an amazing person. But there are sacrifices. As when you have a child, like, there's going to be a ton of financial sacrifices, career sacrifices, emotional sacrifices, and you're prepared for that. But I don't think many people really consider how they're going to handle when their parents are aging, and what those sacrifices might be also on the other side. We expect it with our kids, but not so much with our parents.
It's emotionally exhausting too, because they are seeing themselves not be able to do the things they're used to, and they're not always quiet about that. So you're feeling this burden of watching them like realize that they can't do certain things anymore, and it's hard for them to be around people to see that, and and then you're carrying that. There's just so much weight, I feel like a lot of weight. There's also a weight to like not make the whole visit or the whole conversation or the whole anything about anything bad. So you kind of always like, when you're around a baby and they're crying and you have to like over animate to make the baby stop crying, you have to almost be not overly friendly or overly happy, but you don't want to bring them down either. But it's just a weight, you have to be them that way.
You have to be super cheerful, so that they don't feel like you have resentment or that you're seeing it as a burden, the things that you're doing.
You don't want them to feel guilty either about the guilt, because if they see you feeling the weight, then they'll feel guilty about the weight, and then it'll make the condition worse sometimes. It's hard.
And I think it's hardest for men to be in that position, because especially if they're like really career oriented, successful guys. I know like Alex is, and
athletic and can do a lot of things, and their body can't do it anymore.
They get so frustrated with themselves, and they don't feel that they're relevant anymore. And that's really hard for someone who's used to being the one that everyone leans on to lean on anyone else. So it changes the whole dynamic of the relationship, and you have to be so careful with everything that you do, because as much as you want to care for them, having conversations about, hey, you know, I don't think you should be driving any longer, or
to admit it, that you know, they're also used to they're also used to telling you what's up, you know, so all of a sudden the roles are reversed, and it's kind of like, it's a humbling experience, you know. It's hard to admit to your son or your daughter, your granddaughter, whatever, that you probably shouldn't be, like you said, driving or doing something like that. It's like, you know, no one wants to have the conversation, but you also don't want to worry about the person 24/7 either, you know?
Yeah. And I know for me, like the things that I did, I try with, whether it's my husband or my grandmother, or eventually I know it's going to be my dad. You try to maintain their dignity and their sense of who they are as long as you possibly can. And I mean, you have to stop because it's so normal to want to say, oh, remember I told you, or we talked about this already. And you have to stop yourself from doing that, because it's not their fault for whatever they are going through. And it just reminding them that they have these issues it's so detrimental, because they're already frustrated. And whether it's a cognitive issue or a physical issue, it's almost like you have to ignore the limitation and just, I like to give tasks that they can still do. Don't take everything away from them. If there's things that they can still do for themselves, let them do it, even if it takes them 10 times as long, because they need that autonomous, being able to be independent. It's so important. And it's hard. It's just, it's such a hard place to be in life. And I think, I know that, we can't all take time off from caregiving. We can't, that's what, if you go to a therapist or a doctor and you say, I'm exhausted, I'm caring for my aging parents, I'm caring for my children, I don't have any time for myself. They're going to say, oh, well, you need to carve out time for self-care. You need to get away. You need to reduce your stress levels. Yeah, I know I need to do all that. Like, thank you, genius. But
like turning it off, because caregiving can feel like 24/7. And it's like, you have to cut yourself off in a way, like give yourself visiting hours in that, you know what of course be available all the time, but it's like, I don't know. I feel like you're constantly, you gotta just, if you can't carve time out, you gotta at least cut it off mentally for a little bit,
Yeah, you have to.
Something else.
Yeah. And even if it's a 10-minute walk, even if you have to load kids in a stroller to do it, or walk with your aging parent or whatever it is,
like whatever,
whatever you need to do. And don't feel guilty for taking that time, or if you need to just go out and be in your car for a few minutes and just have silence, there should be no guilt in that. And it's, the thing is that it's really easy to start to slip into unhealthy habits, because they are the easiest, and it's easy at the end of the day to say, you know what, it was such a long day, like I deserve a glass of wine or 2 glasses of wine, and that's fine. It's totally fine. But if you, or you know what, I'm so stressed out, I'm going to go sneak through the McDonald's drive-thru and eat all the things, which is also totally fine. But if you realize that things are becoming habits, the unhealthy little treats that you give yourself are becoming habits. I know for myself,
like further circling the guilt spiral of whatever you're going through, it's not feeding you in a good way.
No. And you're demanding so much right now of your body and your mind and your physical self, that it's the time where you really need to take the best care of yourself. And it's so easy not to do that, because you feel like, you know what, I've earned this, whatever it is.
Science of it is eating certain things at certain times will mess with your sleep cycle, and you need rest. Like, it's not about like, oh, you food shaming or this shaming. Like, no, it's literally about what that is doing to your body chemically and how you need sleep to recover, or
Yeah.
you need a balanced breakfast so you're not like all over the place with your emotions. Like
Yeah.
legit, you need to take care of yourself.
And
You
that can be the self-care that we're talking about. It can be just taking the time to prepare a meal for yourself, what you like, not what someone you're caregiving for wants to eat or should eat, like something that you want to eat. Just taking that short period of time to make yourself something and not like literally eat the leftover crust of your kids' lunch. And,
like the edges of whatever
yeah,
is the cutting board.
yeah,
Mom's lunch.
totally done that. I've eaten the kids' leftover lunch off their plates over the trash can. I can't tell you how many times. But
Because
those
you're
little,
probably getting like, I need you, I need you, I need you from everywhere. Like you have to like, it's gonna happen. And if you
Mhm.
just keep letting it happen and you never take time for yourself, it's like you're gonna explode, like if something's gonna break.
Yeah.
Personally, I feel like I've done that, and you just like you break. You don't like you look in the mirror, you don't recognize who you're looking at anymore. And that's not fair because you're too busy taking care of everyone around you. No, like you deserve that same kind of treatment that you're giving everyone around you too.
Yeah.
So
And just those little acts of like self-love that take care of yourself, and can change your mindset for the day.
like sitting and drinking your coffee versus like
Yeah.
drinking it on the go through your next whatever, a little bit like actually enjoying your coffee. Like that's form of self-care. I feel like people think like self-care needs to be like cucumbers in the eyes, like spa day, like ignoring the phone for 8 hours. No, it can literally be like, wow, I haven't enjoyed my coffee in 8 months and actually drink it warm without having to microwave it four
I was
times.
just going to say that when you go to put your coffee in the microwave and yesterday's coffee is still in the microwave, like that is the wake up call we all have had, that you need to wake up even if it's 15 minutes earlier so you can sit and enjoy your coffee and scroll your phone and just do whatever.
Like, when was the last time you literally just sat and listened to birds chirp outside? Like, or just put the sun on your face. Like, self care can be 10 minutes, but if it's like done well, it can
Mhm.
recharge everything, and then you're good to go for the person who needs you. But
And it
really,
might be like you can be outside sitting with your feet, your toes in the grass or whatever, and be, doing your affirmations for the day or thinking about things that you're grateful for or doing something like that that will change your perspective for
breathing,
the day.
like really breathing, getting that like deep breaths in. Like, man, we're so full of like, I got to be here, I got to do this. We're like shallow breathing and eating poorly and not sleeping and like caffeine intaking. Like, it's just no wonder we're crazy,
Yeah. And
And
there are things that, I mean, I think also, what saved me a lot during that time period was not being afraid to ask for help. I'm someone who doesn't like to ask for help. I'm very independent. I like things done my own way. I've always seen it kind of like a sign of weakness, which I know is not healthy. But that period of time really taught me to look at the resources around me and ask for help, whether it was asking my mom friends if they could help pick up the kids from school, and explaining my situation to them, which is normally something I would never in a million years do. Like I'm so private. Or asking, Alex if, for his help with things around the house that he could do at the time that just take a little bit off my shoulders, or asking my sister, because she lived closer, if she could do some of the errands and things for my grandmother. I got my nieces to help out. I mean,
you did.
I,
I remember. Or if you are close to someone and you notice that they're going through something, they're in the sandwich generation,
yes.
as you call it, and they're going through something, please, like small things like, hey, can I pick up so and so from school for you? Or hey, I have this extra, and you don't have to make it obvious. Like, hey, I have this extra turkey that I accidentally ordered too many on drive up. Can I bring it by? When really you didn't. You just know that they probably need to not worry about dinner tonight because they're going through something. Like just find small ways to help if
And
you know you're
understand
going through that.
And understand that a lot of people are like me and not comfortable asking for help and not even comfortable sometimes accepting help.
It's
So
hard.
sometimes just do the things, like just do the things. And I mean, obviously don't pick up their child from school without their permission. That was the
No,
kidnapping, but
like, you notice and they're not saying anything, but you know them to know that there's like literally something up. Like you don't have to, it's intuition. You don't have to be literally told, like we're also in the social media world now where people kind of share each other's, lives. If you know for a fact that they're going through something big and you can be there for them in some way, like,
Yeah.
it's a big thing because not everyone has the ability to sit down and say, like, okay, I need help. Like I've reached my human limit on what I can physically, emotionally do. And now I need help. It's hard to,
Yeah.
and then you have to go through your mind of like, who am I not going to burden with my extra help? Like, oh, well, so-and-so has 3 kids. They probably don't have time for this. Like, no. So if you notice that they're needing some extra help, maybe reach out because they might be looking at your situation and going, oh, that might be like, they're already assessed. You know what I mean? They're
Yeah.
already
I mean,
assessed.
if someone's going through an illness in their family or anything that that they are probably struggling, I mean, you can, like you said, drop by food, walk their dogs for them, pick up their kids from school for them, things like that. And it's so appreciated. And I think people are always afraid to offend the people or overstep. But I mean, most people would so welcome the help. And
Oh, yeah.
that's another thing. If you can financially afford to delegate the tasks that don't have to be done by you, this is the time of life to do that. This is worth the money.
Yeah.
And it's hard. Well, I'm not very, but I'm fairly frugal. Like I'm practical. And it's hard for me sometimes to pay people for things that I know I can do myself. But
From that like imposter syndrome where we feel like we can do it all. And like, if you can't, then it's like, you're not measuring up. Like really though, like if you can, like you said, get help, like, and pay for help and delegate and like just offload, do that,
yeah, make a list of all the things that have to get done in a week or a day or regularly, and then see a lot of those aren't going to have to be you. I mean, you can Instacart your groceries if you need to, or have them delivered by the grocery store. You can this is the time where it's worth it to have someone come in and deep clean your house for you on a regular basis, or deep clean your loved one's house who physically can't do that. Maybe that's one of the things you're doing for them that doesn't need to be you. Or ordering more takeout and just having a family conversation where you say, look, for this period of time, we're going to eat more takeout. I'm sorry, guys, but this is how it's going to be.
Honest with yourself. It's okay. You don't have to have a 5-course meal while you're also taking care of all the things we mentioned,
Yeah.
Like, come on. Like,
and if
sorry,
you're
I've had a long day, I already know I'm popping that frozen pizza in the oven tonight, and no shame in that. Like,
no shame.
Because
no shame.
It's a rough season right now, and it's not always going to be a rough season. And right now is not my like, let's try that meal on Pinterest today. Like I'm exhausted. Like just do what you can do and don't try and overdo it because like that's gonna add crazy and your guilt and you're like when are you going to, no wonder you say you have no me time. You're trying to cook like a brand new recipe while like running back and forth and doing this and that. It's like not gonna happen. So
no, it's not gonna happen.
Those are very good points,
And I mean, I think most people would be surprised how much of a support system they have around them if they reach out to them. So you have to find a support system, even if those people can't, like you can't delegate tasks to them. It's not that kind of relationship, but having a support system that you can talk to and you can vent sometimes when it's too much, and having, even if it's a friend who's far away that you can call, or it could be a therapist on, Talkspace or BetterHelp. It could be something like that where it's easy to call or text someone when you have a moment and say, really rough day today. And maybe they'll send you a joke, or maybe they'll tell you about their day, or whatever it is that kind of gets you out of your head for a minute. We all need a support system.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, you're carrying like your normal things that is going on in your life. But then after handling the older generation that we talk about, you're also handling that situation and then your kids. And it's just like weight upon weight upon weight. So sometimes simply just like getting it out verbally and talking about it, you just feel lighter and better and less congested with so much going on, because like, when do we ever get noticed that older generation part's going to happen? Like you said, we know when we have a kid, this is going to happen. There's nobody has a kid that comes out like, hey mom, I'm good. Like you go do.
Yeah.
I don't need you. Like we know what we signed up for. With the older generation, it's not even like it could happen. It could be a freak accident that just totally throws you for a loop. And all of a sudden now this is your life, So
Yeah.
it's just a hard transition. And the more support you have, the better off you are. So
And when you talk about support, also, if you are working a full-time job at this time, talk to your employer and let them know what's going on in your life, because first of all, they're going to notice that you're stressed and you're distracted, and maybe your job, performance isn't going to be where it usually is during this period of time. Talk to your employer, let them know what's going on. They'll be sympathetic. I mean, hopefully,
they should be. I
should
I
be.
think a lot of people are afraid to admit, because it's such like a competitive space. In certain spaces, they're afraid to admit they have personal issues, because then other employers might see that as like, a red flag, and but you don't want to work for someone who doesn't understand that, human life happens and things happen that are out of your control. I mean, to be
And I think
completely transparent, I had like an influencer type thing that I had to like be completely transparent with them, and it was a paid thing that I had to be like, sorry, I can't do this. This is what's going on in my life. And I was super worried that it was going to be problematic, and they were so understanding. Most people will be understanding if you're transparent and honest about it. You don't have to be everything all the time. You just have to do the best you can.
I think as women, we already feel that we're not taken as seriously in the professional environment, and our need to take time off for our kids when they're sick or they have stuff going on at school or whatever is seen as unprofessional. So talking to your employer about this might make you feel uncomfortable, but there may be solutions there for you that you didn't even realize you had. That your employer may offer, family time off, or they may offer reduced hours. They may let you work partly remotely. Who knows what they'll say? But just letting them know, because I, as an employer, I can tell you, I notice when one of my employees is suddenly distracted or less available, less quick to respond to my messages. And if I don't know what's going on in their personal life, you don't have to tell them everything, obviously. But if I don't know that something is going on, I might assume they are no longer interested in their job, or that, or that they, are just the motivation is gone or whatever it is. And I try to always talk to them and say, look, I've noticed this, what's going on. And if I know something is going on, I'm so patient and understanding, and try to coordinate with them and make it easier for them, because I've been there myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, we're all, at the end of the day, we're all humans who all our situations might be different, but I'm sorry, they're all not different. I mean, all the feelings that we go through, the emotions we go through, the process in which we go through, is generally the same. So you may never know, your employer might be literally going through the same thing you're going through and might be completely empathetic and understanding, but they might just see that as, like you said, a distraction. And so, I mean, it's tough to be open to friends and family and ask for help. It's tough to be open to your employers and be honest, but it's going to be less burden on you, because you're not worried and have anxiety about oh, well, what if this shows at work? Well, yeah, it will show at work. I don't know. It will show at work. It has shown at work, but you want it to be, you want them to know so that it's not perceived as something it's not,
Right, exactly. And that's key. I think if you are in that kind of situation, and I can only imagine the stress that would come with that. And I have learned going through this with my grandmother. I mean, one of the first things I did because I had no idea how to arrange care for someone. I had no idea what it meant to be someone's guardian who's an adult. I had no idea how to handle banking for her, how to hire a caregiver. I'd never had to do any of that. I learned all of it on the fly.
I would literally Google all of that. I wouldn't know what to do either.
Thank goodness this happened.
I feel like this might be my thing at some point. So
thank goodness this happened in 2015 and not 1995 with no Google, because I don't know what I would have done. But what I learned from this, I came home and I had this conversation with Alex, and I said, we need to make a plan, because I never want my kids to be so blindsided by this. I want to thankfully my grandmother was very good about writing out exactly what she wanted for her end of life care. And I didn't have to make one of the biggest emotional problems that I had was trying to decide if I was doing what was right for her, if I was doing what she would want. There was a tremendous amount of indecision and guilt on my part because I wanted to serve her wishes. I wanted to do what she would have wanted. And I had to guess what that was in some
I
instances.
think a lot of people can understand that. I lost my mom suddenly, but there are people who no longer can, like, their brain function is gone and they're still alive, but they cannot function as themselves. And so people all of a sudden, like you with your grandma, have to talk on behalf of them. And you're like, maybe I'm making the right decision. I don't know. And like, that has to be.
You're already grieving. You're grieving the loss of this person, even though they're physically still there. And then you want to do right by them. And it feels like so much pressure.
Totally.
So, I mean, I told Alex at the time, I said, this could happen to anyone. I could get hit by a bus in the street tomorrow and have brain damage. And you could be making these decisions for me. Yeah. It's not an age specific issue. So it's so important that we all have a plan and that we communicate that plan, whether we write it down and put it in an envelope and tell our kids to open it in case.
It's weird, but it's very important. It's very
People don't like to talk about it. They think it's morbid. They think it's, I don't know, bad mojo, but it's so important. And I can tell the emotional burden that you put on your family when they have to guess. It's so sad and so hard. And I also learned a lot with my grandmother about long-term care and end of life care and how expensive that is. Yes. I mean, I was fortunate enough to be able to hire a caregiver for my grandmother, which without that, I don't know what we would have done. If we would have had to try to move her into our house, it would have been a disaster, not having her there, but our house was not suitable for an elderly person.
Arrange everything and like install stuff sometimes. But my grandparents,
we lived in it.
Those like things put in their stairs towards the end of their life. Yeah, it's a lot going either to a place, having someone come, having them go home. It's financially
so difficult. We lived in a 3-story house with marble stairs everywhere and an unfenced pool. I mean, it would have been a disaster, not safe for anybody. And so I was able to keep her in her own home with a caregiver. But I priced out like not like memory care facilities. I priced out private nursing, 24-hour private nursing, 7 days a week can run you over $200,000 a year. And yeah. And I don't think that most people are expecting that at the end of their life. Everybody worries about retirement. Everybody has an idea that they need to save for retirement, whether they're doing it or not. They know they should be. There's 401ks and IRA. Yeah. Everyone's got 401k or an IRA, or they want to, or we all know we need to do that.
The last like, it's not like a notebook where you're chilling and watching the sunset and then you just go. Like you could be sick. Years of nursing care, or you're taking care of them.
Right. And this is not necessarily an age specific issue. No. You can have something like MS or a long-term cancer or any one of these kind of diseases where you need full-time care for decades. And no one wants to think about that.
That you're fully taken care of for life, and you have your parents. Like, imagine that. It's like all the time, everywhere. It's expensive on
it can be a financial burden to care for your aging parents if their financial situation doesn't allow for you to use their own resources to do that. My grandmother's didn't necessarily. I covered a lot of it. We ended up selling her house after she passed and recouped some of that, but it was very expensive. And at the same time, even if your kids are out of the house, I mean, right now in the world we live in today, most people are supporting their adult children, at least partially, because wages for millennials or whatever is low, and it's hard to make ends meet in the world that we live in today. So, I mean, I know I help my adult children, not every month, but when they need it, and it adds up too. So when you're financially supporting in some way your adult kids and your aging parents, I mean, that is a double whammy financially, and it can get really, really expensive really fast.
All of a
And
sudden you have this house that's empty because your kids are adults, and you have this house you don't know, you don't need that space, but you're still paying for it.
yeah,
I remember when, like, before my mom passed, I was out, she was still helping me. She had this huge house and it was just her and my brother, and it's like you kind of just want to like close up shop and find a cute place by the lake and like have no one call you, and like now's the time I get to live my life. But no, now you have to help your parents and your kids in college who didn't know that rent was due this month, and it's like yeah,
yeah,
it's like such a mess.
yeah. So I really would, I would recommend for anyone, and people also, by the way, have these, the term boomerang children, where you think your children are moved out and independent, and then they lose their job or something happens and they need to move back home. And so
I'm currently in my in-laws home. Yeah.
yeah, this happens, and this is just the world that it is today. I strongly believe in multi-generational living. I think that's fantastic, but it is also can be stressful. So I would encourage anyone who is middle-aged or thinking about the impact that their aging may have on their children. I know I think about it a lot because of what my grandmother went through, and my husband's health issues and what we're dealing with. I think about what my children might have to deal with for me when I'm older. So things like planning your end of life care, long-term care insurance if you don't have the financial resources to stay in your own home and have full-time caregivers, which, as I said, right now in 2021 can easily be 200 grand a year. By the time 20 years from now, 30 years from now, when I'm thinking of that, I don't know how much it'll be.
Yeah.
So long-term care insurance is a really great resource. If you've never heard of that, I strongly recommend people look into that. Writing down exactly what you want to happen. If you're adamantly opposed to a nursing home, tell your kids and family that. Write that down. If you don't carry their way, let them know that too, so they don't have the guilt if they have to put you in one. And yeah, because there's so much guilt.
Voice that, and you put them in a nursing home and they really didn't want it, and they're miserable every day, and you like don't really know why, and it's like it's so good. I strongly recommend that too. My mom, she did not make it, but she passed away suddenly, and she didn't have life insurance, and she didn't write down anything. I think she had a conversation with my dad once that she didn't want to be like cremated, but she didn't have life insurance. So at the time, financially, we couldn't like do what she wanted, because putting someone in the ground is like crazy.
10 grand plus, easily.
So if you don't prepare, then we were left guessing everything, because it was sudden, it was unexpected. But if she had lived, but then all of a sudden couldn't speak, couldn't function, the brain wasn't, that was the first to go, was the brain function. So if she lived, but the brain was no longer there, it would still be the same situation. Well, what would she want to do? Right. If you're sitting there like alive, but can't speak for yourself, you're leaving it up to everyone else to figure it out, and that's hard.
And it's the most painful thing, because if you feel like, is this what they wanted, or would they rather have this? Am I making the right decision? Because you want to honor them, and it's so hard because you're already in a very fragile emotional state, and then you're trying to make these kinds of decisions. It's just not fair. If you can not put that on your kids, I highly recommend you don't. I've told my kids, I don't care. I would happily live in a nursing home. I never got to live in a sorority house because I didn't go to traditional college. I think it would be like the older lady sorority house. I saw my grandmother. We had to put her in a memory care facility for a very short period of time while we renovated her house to make it safe for her. She had, burnt it down too. But I went in there one day and they were playing balloon volleyball and having an ice cream social. And I was like, can I please move in here immediately? Because this looks amazing.
It does look amazing. It does look amazing.
So I'm fine with the old lady sorority house. That's totally fine with me. I also know
strong opinions, you need to write them down. Like you can't expect people to like guess, right?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
And also one thing that was really hard for my sister and I was after my grandmother passed and we were getting ready to sell her house, we had to go through her house, which she had lived in for 50 years, and clean it out. And if there was one thing I would have asked for her to have done differently, it would have been to start minimalizing and
Yeah.
cleaning out her house. She was 90 when she got sick. I mean, she knew she wasn't going to live to be 500, right? So she could have started getting rid of things and cleaning things out. Not that I minded cleaning it out, but I didn't know, as I was going through all the little mementos and things that she had, what had a strong emotional significance to her and what didn't.
Your kids, what she would have wanted to give to your kids.
Right. So just tossing something in a dumpster and I would hold it in my hands and I would be like, did this mean something to her? Am I throwing her away? Yeah, it was so emotional. And it could have been, it was a lot of like cards I wrote her all through my childhood, paint projects I did when I was in elementary. I mean, she kept every single thing, which I thought was so sweet. And I loved it. I love showing my kids. They helped me clean her house out, showing them, all the stuff I did when I was little and made when I was little. And we found a bunch of photos and like those.
I remember you didn't have a lot of photos of you as a kid.
No, I don't.
One baby photo.
Yeah.
How is that possible?
I was raised by a single dad. Like he was not thinking about that.
I needed more proof you had an actual childhood and you didn't just.
I didn't show up fully formed. Like Buddha from the lotus.
Like your teens and your 20s, but like not a lot of like, she was never an actual child, I bet.
No, I was never a baby. No, there's no proof. No, but it was so hard to do that. So I know as I get older, especially if I'm diagnosed with something, I am for sure going to purge my living space and I'll minimalize. I'll live in a smaller space. I'll get rid of a lot of clutter, because I don't want my kids to have those kinds of difficult decisions.
Things that are important to save, if they're supposed to go to someone or be done by something, like write that down.
Write it down.
Yeah.
I still have
somebody at this time,
Yeah. I still have like crates and crates of some of my grandmother's things because I just don't know what to do with them. And it was too hard to get rid of. So I would definitely recommend that. And then, one thing that we didn't touch on, but I think we should quickly before we wrap up is this is probably the most stressful time. We already know it's the most stressful time for women going through this, but it's the most stressful time on a marriage. And this is a time when a lot of marriages fall apart, and not because, lack of commitment, but because it's an easy time for both parties to build a lot of resentment. The husband can feel very neglected when all your attention is on the children and the parents. It could even be his parents, but it doesn't matter. He's just not getting any attention. And he might be understanding, but if it goes on for a long period of time, it's hard not to feel neglected. It's hard not to feel and then if you get attention from an outside source, it's a really tempting time. And for women, they don't feel like they have a lot of support. They're exhausted. At the end of the day, the last thing they want to do is like be around anyone else, even if it's their husband.
Or even if like someone moves back in, like an in-law you can't afford caregiving, like, or a place. So they're now moving in and all of a sudden the husband is now sharing a space with their mother-in-law or their mother or their, like fill in the blank. But it's like a total shift in like where the attention's going. And
so there's resentment on both sides because there's resentment from the husband not having.
Why don't you understand?
Right. And you could be living with, his family members who, you're not completely comfortable. So it's the whole situation is just like ripe for marriages to fall apart. So I would highly recommend, if you're in this situation, that you'd schedule you hire a sitter and a respite caregiver if you need to, if you can afford it, and go on date nights, go on weekends away. You need to recharge your batteries, and you need to have time where you both agree, we're not going to talk about the kids. We're not going to talk about the parents. We're not going to talk about whatever else. We're just going to spend time together. And it's really hard to do. Really hard to do.
Some really weird, awkward date nights where I'm like, oh my gosh, we just talked about like kindergarten ideas for 19 minutes.
Yeah.
That was cute. That was a fun, sexy date.
And I know Alex will be like, I don't want to talk about the kids and I don't want to talk about, this other thing that's going on in your life. And I'll be like, but that's all I have to talk about. Nothing else is going on with me.
Friends, you talk about your kids. Like, that's like what, I'm sorry. And
that's my whole day.
It's such like an internal moment where you're like, I am nothing else. This is such a wake up call that I am not to bring to the social table with my whatever.
I haven't seen any shows. I haven't watched any news. I haven't read anything. I've got nothing for you.
Yeah, and it's very important though to make that a priority and to not like burden any, and to also, here's the thing, it's also important because I'm currently in that situation real quick before we wrap up, to also like share the responsibility of who's planning it and who's doing what. Like so, like if it's also the person who's also planning everybody else's life, like the wife role, then it almost feels like I'd
Another
rather
chore. Yeah.
and just take myself out by not doing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we trade off. I'll plan one and then the next time Alex will plan it.
Yeah.
So, and it's pretty funny because he's not great at planning things. So we get some pretty unusual things.
Oh my gosh, how nice is that? You just have to like show up or be told what to kind of wear.
Yeah.
It's never good. I feel like but sometimes they're fun. When Dan planned our last one, we got like Cheesecake Factory cheesecake to go in the mall parking lot and watch people.
Okay.
You know what? It wasn't fancy, but we talked forever and I ate cheesecake and it was like, what else do I need? Like, you know, sometimes it's all about getting away and getting your headspace in a place where it's not thinking about all the bullshit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
That's what it's really about, and connecting on a level that's like pure and fun and like doing the heart good, because all the other so dark and heavy and burdensome that you just kind of need to disconnect from that for a minute.
You need to be around your person and just let yourself remember who you were before all this stuff started. And if you're already past that and you're already into the resentment building zone, I mean, don't be afraid to, this is couples therapy 101. This is the time that you need to do that. Because
golf for like a little bit and just see how, I mean, it might be rocky at first, but you'll get better at it. It takes time.
And if you are already resentful or he's already resentful, or you need to talk about that in a safe environment, don't be afraid to do therapy. This is the time that it's most needed, because the thing is, the kids are going to move on in their lives and they're not going to be a daily presence in your and your husband's relationship at some point, or you and your spouse's relationship at some point. And your aging parents will eventually, either be in a home or pass or whatever is going to happen there. It's all temporary. And so at the end of that, it will be you and your partner, and you guys need to be able to heal from the trauma of this sandwich generation period and be there for each other, and still hopefully, have a great relationship when that happens. A lot of relationships fall apart. So don't forget to nurture it, because it's only going to last so long and you need each other.
That's very true. Ooh, heavy one.
That was a heavy topic. I feel like we always pick heavy topics.
Talk about like bathing suits for your body type or something. We can't with this heavy stuff. I mean, I feel like I could talk about it because it's easy, because life is heavy. Things are relatable. Yeah. But man, like, this is so personal for us.
It really is personal for both of us. And I also wanted to let everybody know, first of all, thank you guys for tuning in. We really appreciate your support. You can find us on all the social media channels and our website, of course, she'safullonmonet.com. But we've also started a Facebook group, which is a discussion board where you guys can all be part of the conversation, whether it's the topic that we covered in the podcast or one of the articles we wrote about. If you have something that you want to say, or you want to start a conversation about one of our articles, please join our Facebook group. And that will be a place where everyone can kind of get involved in the conversation. I'm really excited about it, because that's, community is one of our brand values. And this will give us the opportunity to really create a community of our followers and readers. And I'm excited to launch this. So guys, check that out on Facebook and let us know what you think. Thank you again. Please follow, like, subscribe, do all the things. Do all the things. We appreciate the support. It really means a lot.
Yes, very much so. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys, and see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode. Don't forget to bookmark our site, she'safullonmonet.com, and subscribe to our newsletter. You can also find us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. If you're enjoying this podcast, it helps us a lot if you can follow, rate, and review. See y'all next week.